Hello and welcome to my book review for There There by Tommy Orange. This is an adult contemporary novel set in Oakland about a number of characters who are all going to an upcoming powwow for a variety of reasons. I gave this 4 stars. This was an absolutely wonderful, gorgeous, powerful book. I highly recommend, just to say that off the bat. This was so close to 5 stars for me, and just like kind of lost me a little bit in like the second half of the book, but so stunning, so wonderful. I really loved his writing style in this. Tommy Orange is a gorgeous writer, like just right off the bat. His writing is so beautiful and just like so powerful. He's so good with just portraying emotion, and like the emotions in this were so visceral, especially the rage, because this book is full of rage for a variety of reasons, and he captures it wonderfully. I think that was like the most powerful aspect of this book. It's just that, like, it is filled to the brim with rage, and it hurts at points to read, and I absolutely adored that. I also really love the variety of characters. There are so many different characters in this, and I really thought at the beginning that that was going to be such a negative for me, and it wasn't. All of the characters are very distinct. They all have clear motivations. They're all completely well-rounded people who feel real, and they all have such distinct voices. Like, you're reading this book with like 15 different point of views in it, and every point of view sounds different. They all sound like their own person, and that's so hard to do, and he does it so well. I also think the sense of place in this book was absolutely stunning. It really makes me wish I knew more about Oakland, because so much of this book is about living in Oakland and what it means to be an Indigenous person living in Oakland, and like how being, urban and Indigenous is very different than living on a reservation. And it was like stunningly done. It reminded me a lot of reading S.A. Cosby, who also has such an intense knowledge of place in his writing, and I loved that experience because he writes about the location I'm from. And I really think if you know anything about Oakland, if you're like at all familiar with Oakland, that will hit so much harder, because I did feel like as I was reading this, it was just like, I wish I knew Oakland. Like, this book made me wish I felt that connection with it, because I do think it was masterfully done. There are 2 small things that I kind of had an issue with. The first was that there is a constant switching of tints and perspective in this book. There are so many different characters, and they have different ways of telling their stories. Some are in first person, some are in third person, some are in past tense, some are in present tense, and I didn't really enjoy the switching back and forth between each chapter. It felt jarring to me, and it always takes me a minute to adjust whenever you're like switching from like first person to third person. My brain just needs that moment to adjust, and I did feel like I was kind of losing out a little bit, because it would take me a second to just like get used to the shift. I kind of wish there'd been a little bit more continuity there. And I also think the dialogue at times was like a little bit clunky, a little bit expository. Like, they would have long paragraphs of like saying something and just like explaining the situation. Not often, but it did happen a few times, and I wasn't really a fan of that. The thing that I love the most about this book, that I think was so powerful, was the way that in many ways it was just a beginning for all of these characters. And not in a way that like it demands a sequel or anything like that, because this is very clearly a standalone and it tells the story enough. But at the point where it stops, it does feel like so many stories are just beginning, and you don't get that closure. You get the pieces of their lives with an idea for their future and where it will go from there, but you don't get closure. You don't get like the end to their stories. You just get this glimpse of like there's so much more to come for them. And it was just so masterfully done. Like, it was absolutely gorgeous the way he did it. Like, it so easily could have gone on for too long and like given the reader more information and given that closure, but the book didn't need that, and it was honestly so much stronger for it. Finally, my biggest issue with this, and honestly the main reason that it didn't get 5 stars, was because there were so many characters, and especially towards the end there were a couple that absolutely lost me. Like, I loved this. I was so enthralled, and then I would get to 1 or 2 chapters, 1 or 2 characters in the second half of this book, And I was just sitting there like, I have no idea who you are. I have no idea what role you play in this larger story. And I felt absolutely lost. And I do think I got overwhelmed in this book by how much was happening from so many different perspectives. And it could have been like reined in, like just a little bit. Like, I loved that there was so much going on and it was so well done, but it was just like a little bit too much for me. And I did feel myself kind of losing the threads of the plot a couple of times later on in the book. Like, for most of it, absolutely stunning, absolutely wonderful. But I think there were like 2 chapters I was reading in the second half, and I just could not figure out what it meant within the context of the story and who these people are. And I think it was just like a little bit too much for me. But overall, this was stunning. This was wonderful. I'm so sad, honestly, that he hasn't published a book since. This was published like 5 years ago, and he has a new one coming out next year that I'm very excited for, because I definitely want to read more from him. This book was absolutely wonderful, and I would highly recommend if it at all sounds like something you would enjoy. Let me know down below if you've read There There and what you thought of it if you have. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.